Hi, this is the Limitless podcast with your host, Lori Moilov, and I have a special guest with me, Jennifer Vogt. Jennifer Vogt has over 30 years of experience in entertainment. For the first decade of her career, Miss Vogt had her own entertainment design company working with major studios and Broadway production companies to conceive, design, and execute more than 150 feature films, broadcast TV, live theater, and themed entertainment and international productions. Her experience includes finance, consulting, internal audit positions, and increasing responsibility at KPMG, DreamWorks Animation, and Hewlett Packard. In that, you also were very pivotal in the closing the deal with the Oriental DreamWorks and also their joint venture. Also, you were a part of the DreamCenter team, which was a $2.4 billion real estate development in Shanghai. And you were doing that all simultaneously. And also, I mean, like, hearing about some of your experience, one of the amazing projects that you worked on was the Star Wars portfolio. You were in charge of that portfolio, the show design, and you are a production executive of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which was actually one of the largest expansions in history. Can you kind of go into the creative process of that and how working with that team, like how it came from idea conception to like fruition, like a real land for Disney?
Well, certainly. So just to clarify a little bit, I worked on the show side of Disney, and Disney has a number of studios. It has a creative studio, a show studio. Those are have been combined. Then it also has an architectural studio and a ride studio. So I was in that show section, and what the show section does is they take the creative ideas from the creative studio, from the creative directors, and are realizing those ideas. And so if you were to equate that to other parts of the industry, in film, you would call that person sort of like a production designer or art director. In theater, you would call them kind of like the set designer or technical director. Or, you know, there are other names, lighting designer, not necessarily the front end ideation, but it is the middle step, which is really realizing it all and seeing it from, you know, the drawing stage all the way through to getting it built and getting it installed into the field. So what we do in that aspect is really you are trying to get into the head of the creative directors and really try to embody what it is. What are they talking about? What are they looking for? What is their vision? And in realizing that vision, you have to kind of become like fluent in their thought process and their vibe and what language they're speaking. And then in doing that, you're able to express that through the actual scenic paint or the actual animation or the actual figures that are getting built or whatever those kinds of things are. You're able to express those ideas physically. And the only way you can really truly do it well is to really evoke the essence of the idea, because there are so many ways to execute on an idea. Because everybody has a different experience. So for example, if I were to say to you, make it green could mean a million things to you, right? What color green? I don't know. Or is green a feeling? Like, what does that honestly mean? And really, this is a goal of somebody that's in a design aspect or, you know, in that that transition phase from an idea to a realization. And that's really what a designer does. So, you know, that's been my career almost the whole time, except for when I escaped and I was in finance and internal audit and things like that. But that's really my passion. And so, you know, that's really what a designer does. They're really translating this concept and making it real. And so to get back to that green idea, well, you have to be able to know what it is that the individual who's giving you that thought and giving you that instruction
Mm-hmm.
is what they really mean by green.
Yeah.
And, it gets really tricky. So you have to be really sensitive
Mm-hmm.
to what they're saying and how they say it.
Yeah.
And the images that they share with you, that they say, I want it to be kind of like this, but they don't really mean that exact thing. They
Mm-hmm.
mean sort of like some version of it. And so trying to decipher what that some version is really the skill of that role and of that whole group of individuals, and the skills honestly on Galaxy's Edge were amazing. I mean, we had some incredibly talented people on that team, and to watch them do that translation was just magnificent. So
Yeah.
very cool.
I mean, I just for myself, I remember just standing in the dirt, seeing just the dirt, and then like everyone with their construction hats, and then to actually see it come to life and actually be in the land, it was just momentous, and the scale was so vast, and it makes a lot of sense why it won so many awards in design, because it was just like I mean, if any of our listeners haven't been, I definitely highly suggest you go, whether you go to Florida or Anaheim, because it was just such a stellar job from your team, and such a cool experience, and so many things
I
were
mean,
thought of.
it's exactly. And it is a real team effort. Every single person that is working there in Imagineering, or that's one of the vendors or the contractors, every single one of those people is contributing in some way to the success of the theme park. And what is amazing is how many people it really takes to do
Yeah.
something like that. And if you're in other industries, when I first came in, I couldn't believe how many people that it took, because when you come
Right.
from Philly or from theater, you have like 3 people. And so it is easy to sort of misunderstand, and certainly I misunderstood how many people that it took. But then when you're there at 3 a.m. and things are getting installed,
Mhm.
and you have to be there again at 7 a.m,
Mhm.
you understand how it takes so many people. And also because the attention to detail that is necessary for something like that requires so many people crawling all over it, fussing over everything in a good way,
Yeah.
to make sure that every little thing, every bolt, every ride vehicle, every sound design, every bit of audio tape, every lighting cue, every single thing is meticulous. And I think that's honestly, if I were to sing a few praises about Imagineering and Disney, this is one of the things that they do better than anybody else, is this meticulous attention to detail, such that when you, as a person, go to the land and you walk in, you're there.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to break your suspension of disbelief to put you anywhere else. There isn't a screw or theme pavement or painting job or
Yeah.
anything out of place. And that is the collective skill of an enormous amount of people to do all that work. And it was really kind of awe-inspiring to see that. But I'll honestly say, and to anybody who's from Imagineering listening to this, that's one thing, but feature film is not meant to be around for 50 years, 100 years, or whatever. So it's a different level of attention to detail, because of the fact that you have people trampling all over it and touching everything and sticking their pennies places that they shouldn't go, and all these kinds of things. And all of that is attended to. All of that needs to be addressed and thought of.
I'm curious on your approach with teamwork and creation and collaborative nature of creativity. Like, what are some of the things, like some of our listeners, tools that they can derive from maybe something that you learned from that vast, big project and many other projects that you've worked on, because you also built a team for Madison Square Garden, and now you have a new company that you're starting in Italy. Can you kind of go into like the formation of teams? How do you build those teams?
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing for people to think about when they think about creative teams is that, unlike somebody who works in finance, and having worked in finance, I can speak for this very specifically, is that the only thing that you have when you're a creative individual is your head, your mind, your brain. And there's nothing else, honestly, because everything is an expression thereof. When you're painting your vision. When you're drawing your vision. When you're writing your vision. When you are acting, you're acting your vision. Whatever those things are, they're coming from you and only your brain. And as a result, I firmly believe that creative individuals have to feel comfortable and feel safe, such that they can take risks. Yeah. If creative individuals are put into a situation where they don't know if they can have their job, they don't know what project they're working on, it's confusing, or it's overly burdensome from a administrative or bureaucratic standpoint, it's just a disaster, because it's too much. It's like, it's too much to think about and too much to deal with. And so, so many people say like, oh, they're creative, let's kind of like baby them and coddle them. And that's honestly not it. That is, in my personal view, I think that's a little bit uninformed, because in truth, it's really about, and I'm a creative person myself. So, I sort of feel like I have some knowledge in this area. When I feel comfortable, when I feel safe, I can come up with a million ideas. But the minute that I don't know what the situation is, I don't know what my job is. Things are not clear. It's not clear as to what somebody wants, or they keep changing their mind, or they have no idea what they want, or they're inexperienced, or whatever those things are, those like sort of distractions, if you will. Those distractions take energy, and the energy just makes it very difficult for you to focus in on what you're doing and to feel like you can take risks. Because ultimately, creativity is about taking risks. It's problem solving, and it's taking risks. And the only ways in which you can do the best kind of creative action is to be able to be open, really, really, really open to whatever's going on in the world, whatever those inputs might be. And that's how you're going to get your best ideas. If you have 3 sources of information, you're not going to come up, in my view, with a really great idea. But if you have like 45 different sources of information, and hopefully opposing ones as well, you're going to come up with a better idea. It's going to be stronger. It's going to be more balanced. It will be something that will be able to be pushed upon and still be able to stand up on its 2 feet. And also, I think that if ideas have some thing to push against, whether it might be a budget or a time schedule or space constraint, some kind of constraint, that typically leads to a better idea as well. If somebody has an unlimited budget, the idea gets very lazy, and people get very lazy as well. But if there is something to push against, it makes people think. And that's the wonderful thing about our minds, is that we can synthesize all this information. We can have a gestalt about all this different kind of information, and come up with something really, really unexpected or interesting. So in terms of building a creative team, I look for people that they don't have to be traditionally creative. They don't have to necessarily have a role that is like that. But I'm interested in the chemistry of people that come together. So one of the things I did at Madison Square Garden was really bring together people from diverse industries, because I was trying to answer the question related to what we were trying to do from a content perspective standpoint. We were trying to make the sort of new media. So what is new media? Well, it's sort of an amalgamation of lots of different things. So, I had people from lots of different industries in there, and it was the most amazing chemistry from a team perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so proud of that team. And it's, unfortunate that the team is no longer together, but they really were, I would call it like a dream team of individuals that came from all these different places. And it's kind of going to what I'm saying about, lots of different ideas. Every single one of those people had a different viewpoint from something. Some came from animation, some came from theme parks, some came from film, some came from theater, and some came from, print media and all these kinds of things. And so, or special effects. And we put all these people together in the room, and it was amazing, the things that were really coming together. And it's only a result of all the variety of that. So, the diversity makes for better ideas.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you mentioned about like diversity and having an inclusive space where people and ideas and experiences and life experiences kind of come together to paint, whether it's a picture, a land, whatever that is. And I was wondering if you can kind of go into your own creative process. I know that you're now painting and doing all sorts of art. Like, I guess what taps you in and what gets you in the flow when you kind of start with an idea?
I think first, I think about the emotion. So what is it that I am trying to convey? And, what you see behind me is I'm copying a painting, so that, we can put that to the side. But at first, it's about what I'm trying to convey. What do I want to express? And what do I want to come across through that expression? Because if I go back to, what is green, right? Everybody has a different reaction to something. And so my goal is to provide some form of hook and understanding to somebody that can be, I would say, sort of universal, but at the same time can be different for each individual person based upon their particular experience in life. And I think that's where it gets important, because we are all different, and that is interesting. And yet there is so much commonality. So what I always try to think about is, what is that common thread? What is that common story? What's the common emotion that we could have at sort of its most basic level? Like, we all love, for example, we all have the capacity to love, right? Something like that. And what does that mean for us? And then you layer on top of that society and the different societal aspects. And then you layer on top of that the medium and how that will express itself. So that's kind of how I go about it. It's like, I think of the basics first, if you will, and then I layer on top the different aspects that I think will make the story express the feelings and thoughts that I have when I am part of that story or expressing the story.
Wow. That's really cool of an approach. I never thought of it that way, but I'm like, yeah, that is kind of true. You kind of like start layering and building to build that masterpiece, whatever form that is. My other question for you is really about, for our listeners, I know you've kind of been in a managerial position over creatives, also worked with creatives. You're a creative yourself. In that landscape, are there certain tips and suggestions you have for creatives, whether it's, sharpening their tools, learning? Are there any certain tips and suggestions you have for some of our Limitless listeners that, maybe need a tool or an idea or something? Like, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest things is really understand the space in which you're playing in and all aspects of it. And when I say all aspects, I mean everything from high technology to low tech. Like, if you can get by doing whatever you're doing with a pencil, know your pencil. If you can get
Mhm.
by also with, some Wacom tablet or something
Yeah.
like that, right? Then know that as well. And you have to kind of know everything in between. And
Mhm.
that's really important because ultimately you're exercising your brain muscle in creating.
Mhm.
And in doing that, you have to know all those places. If you're trying to do something in 3 dimensions, if you're only relying on the computer to help you 3-dimensionalize something, then you're actually shorting yourself.
Mm.
If you don't know how to do that in your mind without any tools,
Mhm.
then you need to practice that skill,
Mm.
because that, again, your brain is a muscle, your creativity is a muscle. It needs to be practiced and it needs to be used and it needs to understand all of its pieces, because you never actually know with any project that you're doing what you're going to come up against.
Mhm.
And because of that, you have to know all the tools and you have to know all the paths and ways to get there. So that's, I would say, would be one of the most important things, is to really understand your space
Mhm.
and to know it really, really well. And then the next thing I would say, which is that I talked about diversity earlier, and I think
Mhm.
diversity is huge. You should be really purposely exposing yourselves to the other point of view
Mhm.
and to the points of view that may be uncomfortable for you,
Mhm.
and to the points of view that are comfortable for you. Whatever those points of view are, you should be experiencing those things, because again, creativity is the synthesis of lots of varieties of informations coming together and creating an idea.
Mhm.
And if you are only hanging out in the beige world, you're never going to make a very colorful idea, right?
Mhm.
And it's also about including yourself and building teams that are diverse teams.
Mhm.
Your teams need to have diversity on them of all
Mhm.
different shapes and sizes. And that's really, really, really important, because it's those people, whether it is their experience, their physical makeup, their work experience, it doesn't matter, but they have to be diverse. And that is really, really important, because it's from all of that that the best ideas will come forward.
Mm. I totally agree with you. And you mentioned in there a little bit about, creating these images in your mind. So I guess I was wondering if you can kind of go into visualization, because I feel like, especially as a tool, as an artist, or putting something together or starting with that idea, sometimes it's the easiest way to transcribe that is visualization. I was wondering if you could
Mhm.
kind of go into that process, for some of our listeners who maybe they are visualizing or doing that, but they just haven't defined it yet. I was wondering if you
Mhm.
could kind of go into that process.
Well, I think there are lots of different kinds of visualization. So there's
Mm-hmm.
like visualization of an idea, then there's
Mm-hmm.
visualization of you and your success and like
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things. And I'm not going to really go down that path, but I'll talk about the first one.
Right?
So, okay, I think because the second is a different topic.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
in terms of visualizing, so in the design process, for example, when you're hearing all of the pieces of information from somebody and they say something like, we're going to do Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we want it to look like Star Wars, but we don't want it to replicate any of the films.
Mm-hmm.
We want it to feel like it's been around forever. We
Mm-hmm.
want it to feel known, to be a human scale. We want it to express a certain like it's been forgotten. It's a place that was maybe really popular at one point in time, but now it's forgotten. Or it's a
Mm-hmm.
place where there are smugglers and there's lots of undercurrents of activities and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So when people are saying these words to you, you get images in
Mm-hmm.
your mind, right? And so in terms of visualizing, you're putting that little like scrapbook
Mm-hmm.
together of images. But the other thing that's happening is you're actually starting to build a space. So you're
Mm-hmm.
building a space in 3 dimensions in your mind. When somebody
Mm-hmm.
says, like, I want it to look like the films, but not, well, then you're sort of cycling through all the films.
Yeah.
Okay, that's sort of the language of the films, right? And then they say, I want it to be like a dusty, dirty outpost. Okay, well, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And so then you like delete a bunch of stuff. You're like, okay, I don't, not that, not that, not
Mm-hmm.
that, right? And you start to sort of construct in your mind an image, a feeling,
Mm-hmm.
colors, walls. For me, it's I can see when somebody just puts all these words together, I can literally see the space in 3 dimensions. It's as though I'm standing there. The
Mm-hmm.
room that I'm in disappears, and I am only in this, almost like I might as well have a virtual headset on. I am
Mm-hmm.
in that space. And when somebody says, and it's dusty, then if I had anything in there that was clean, all immediately it's replaced with things that are dusty.
Mm-hmm.
And if they say, and it's nighttime, then all of a sudden the sun goes away,
Mm-hmm.
and it's nighttime. And now I see the lights and the glow of little windows. And then they say,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no glass. Oh, all the glass goes away. No
Yeah.
reflections, right? So like, oh, but maybe there's a reflection, but it's, the firelight reflecting on a wall, and you see it through a window from a distance. So these
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things. So like, this is how my mind works.
Mm-hmm.
And so I start to see that room or that environment, and I can see it down to every single little detail. And then if they say to me, actually, we're coming at it from a different direction. And then I go, whoop, and all of a sudden I can turn the whole thing around, and I can see the whole thing from a totally different direction. So I don't know, I haven't actually talked to many people to know whether they do the same thing, but this is how,
Yeah. I was like,
word,
I
but this is how it works for me. So
I feel like
that's
I
what
just went on a whole little visualization ride. It was like, wow, okay. I was like, I didn't even need the headset either, how you were describing it. But yeah, like that's so amazing. I think like definitely visualization helps creatives kind of see the vision through before it lands on the page or lands on a
Mhm,
computer screen, because
mhm.
that kind of helps. Also, that probably helps save some time too, because if you see it in your mind first, it kind of eases the process. Um, one question I have for you, which I ask all my limitless guests, is what their one word is that coincides with creativity. What would your one word be?
I use limitless, because I do think it's completely apt.
Hmm.
The only thing I would say though is limitless with a constraint. I know that's not one word, but I don't know one word in the English language that would put that
Put
together.
it all together. But yeah, no, I totally kind of agree with you. It takes a little bit, you need a little bit of pressure. I guess kind of like a diamond, diamonds happen with pressure and extreme heat and all that. And I think like having sometimes some constraint kind of forces you to be like, okay, I got to get this done by this date, this time. So it's like deadlines, budgets, and all that kind of stuff that
Yeah, so the necessary evils.
I
The things we
guess.
never want, but we must have.
We must have. Well, I guess because then it would be like the creativity. It would be never ending. You wouldn't get to the finished product. So it kind of helps it bud to a head. um,
Yeah, I mean, everything, in order for it to be realized, it needs to have some reality spooned into it. So,
right.
as much as we don't want it, but it would never be real if it didn't have something that was real about it. So
Yeah.
there you are.
Very true. Well, I just want to thank you. And I also wanted to find out where some of our listeners can kind of either follow you, find you online. Can you share some of those resources where some of our Limitless listeners can follow you?
Sure. Well, I didn't name my company, so it's Atelier Cielo e Prato, and we have a minuscule Instagram page. I think we have like 2 posts at the moment. It's a totally new company, but you're welcome to check us out and see what we're doing there. And then I have my personal fine art page, which is Jennifer Vogt Fine Art, also on Instagram. So I kind of hang out there on Instagram. So you're welcome to join me there.
And do you have also a website that some of our listeners can follow as well, or
Not yet?
not yet? Okay, cool. Well, just follow Jennifer on Instagram. I guess, really the truth is Instagram's the place to be now. So come follow Jennifer on Instagram. And thank you so much for being an amazing guest. I know our listeners have definitely learned a lot, whether that's being on the visualizations ride with you or learning about Star Wars and that whole process of building that team. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for being on the podcast and sharing your words of creativity with us.
My pleasure.
Thanks
so much.
Lori.